Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Elizabeth Kipp, a stress management and historical trauma specialist who uses trauma-trained and yoga-informed addiction recovery coaching, ancestral clearing, compassionate inquiry, and yoga to help people with their healing. Elizabeth has healed from over 40 years of chronic pain, including anxiety, panic attacks, and addiction. Now in long-term recovery, she guides others to unleash their healing power and find freedom from suffering to live a thriving life. Today, we'll be diving into the modality of ancestral clearing to help release the effects of unresolved intergenerational trauma with a special focus on clearing the mother wound. So welcome, Elizabeth. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And I'd love to just dive right in. What exactly is ancestral clearing?
Thanks so much, Katie. It's great to be here. Ancestral clearing is actually a trademarked and registered energy modality. We call it energy medicine. The science world will call it energy medicine. That was registered and trademarked by John Newton of Health Beyond Belief. Very careful up front to say we don't make claims that we can heal anything in particular. But we do, the process addresses the spiritual components of things that may be in the way of healing. So we have, and I could get into that more, but really what we're doing there, just a kind of a thumbnail on what it is, we're actually calling in the energy of the creator, higher power, source, whatever you want to call, whatever created all of this. We're asking it to help us release that which no longer serves us. And we use the word forgive to mean offering up that which no longer serves us. And so we use it in a prayer form. And when I first came into this, I have a science background. So when I first came into this practice, I had heard about some of the studies around the effectiveness of prayer, but I was still like not, I didn't necessarily believe it or not believe it. I was just, oh, that's a thing. But I didn't have any, really, I didn't have any experience with it particularly. And then I came into this practice and I had no idea what I was walking into when I experienced it for the first time and I felt the effect. And everyone in the room felt the effect. So it wasn't just me. I was so impressed with the effect that it had on me and the effects that others were reporting in the room that I was like, what just happened? Is this repeatable? Is it measurable? And does he teach it? Is it teachable? And the answer to all of that was yes, except I don't know that it's been actually measured. That scientific studies haven't been done on measuring it. We did have a practitioner do a PhD on consciousness, and this was included as a piece of that dissertation. Anyway, so it's a practice, it's an energy healing practice. We look at the spiritual aspects of what might be effects, imprints from the past that might be blocking healing or abundance or being able to live to our full potential. And I've been doing this practice for 10 years. John Newton has been to Health Beyond Belief, who trademarked and registered. It's been in this for about 35 years, 40 years maybe. So it's been around. He did it, I'm not sure he did it in such a big way until except from the last 10 or 15 years or so. But anyway, the interesting thing about the ancestral clearing, so we say it's an energy modality but the science around that underpins that practice is also interesting. But it gives us a little bit of grounding for people that want, what does science have to say about imprints from the past, right? And studies have been done on animals, albeit nematodes, but still an animal, that measure 14 generations back. And most, like in the yogic tradition and the Native American tradition and other spiritual and even religious traditions, tend to reference 7 generations. The imprint comes at 7 generations. But from the quantum viewpoint, we're everywhere at one. So we have access to all of it. There's no limitation. Quantum physics tells us, for those of you that aren't in that space, quantum physics tells us that in the present moment, we have access to the past, present, and future all at once. It's a mind-blowing concept, but there it is. And we do the work in the present moment. We heal in the present moment. We can't heal in the past or the future. So all healing happens in the present moment. This practice takes advantage of the present moment. And in my sciencey logical mind, that's why this works, is because we're stepping into the present moment. It gives us access, right? And then we're actually asking for help. And we want to release stuff that's no longer serving us. That's a whole nother layer of effect. And then we're calling in on the boss of all bosses, the power source, to help us. And my experience is that when I ask for help at that level, I get help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it may not be exactly the way I wanted it, but I get an answer. I get help, so that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the mother issue, and when we look at from science, looking at prints from the past through the mother, when your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, at the 4-month mark, all the eggs your mother would ever had developed. So you were sharing space with your mother and your grandmother for 5 months. So that's powerful, because you're not just energetically exposed to everything your mother's going through during her pregnancy, but you're energetically exposed to, for 5 months, of what your grandmother went through in her pregnancy. So that's interesting. Beginning to, oh, well, no wonder I had this thing with my grandmother. We have these things in common, right? And then if you think about that, your grandmother spent time in her grandmother and her grandmother. So you've got this line going way, way back of mothers and daughters sharing energy, sharing whatever the stories were, whatever the experiences were, and the imprints that they left, whether that was joy or tragedy or anything in between. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that to me was very powerful. Then there's a woman who wrote a book. I'm trying to remember her name. There's a book called Mother Hunger. And I really encourage everyone to listen to that, listen to the Audible. That's how I took it in, or you can read it. But I really encourage people to pick that book up, because it really explains the science and some of the psychology of mothers and daughters and what happens there. And then I just brought in the grandmother piece, so you can put all of that together. You can amplify that and add in the grandmother stuff and the great grandmother and all that. There's the thing around the mother hunger, which I thought was so interesting. I was listening to that work, and I had my own issues with my own mother. And then I was doing ancestral clearing, and this is where I came up with the ancestral clearing for the mother wound. Was that we have a profound relationship with our mothers because of this origin. It's different from our fathers. We have a profound relationship with our father, but it's different. And we're centered on mothers here in this podcast. So we spent time in their energy. That stuff imprints into the cells, into the kind of energetic field. And one of the things that happened to me, just as an example, is when I was literally delivered as a baby, my mother went into a deep depression, and I was separated from her at that point for 9 months.
Mm.
So that's a rupture. That's a huge rupture. Nowadays, they'd probably be doing trauma therapy around that for that little one. But I'm just saying, back in when I was born, that wasn't a thing. They didn't understand it. And I couldn't take in, so I wasn't, so separated from her, number one. Number two, not breastfeeding. Huge deal. Third, I wasn't able to take in sustenance because I had a closed pyloric valve, which is the little valve that opens when you swallow, and it opens so that the contents can go in the stomach. My pediatrician put me on a 45-degree angle, my mattress on a 45-degree angle, the whole crib, and gravity opened after 2 weeks. But basically, I was somehow, I'm not sure how, I guess I've given me intravenous fluids. I'm not sure how I stayed alive, but I'm just saying that's a lot of stress. And a big rupture in the mother wound, that's a mother wound, a couple of mother wounds right there. And then my mother had she was an undiagnosed, untreated bipolar disorder person, and had pain in her back, which I later developed, interestingly. And she treated with alcohol. So a lot of chaos, and her personality was quite unpredictable. So a lot of rage, like every day, and we didn't know when, and it was just like that. So a lot of intense energy around my mother. And I really didn't understand the extent of how difficult it was, how profound this wound was between my mother and this rupture, the wound that the rupture created. And the thing with my mother not really being able to, she just wasn't a model mother at all. I never remember ever sitting in her lap. I never remember her arms around me. That might have happened, but I don't have any memory of that. So I'm listening to this book, The Mother Hunger, and I'm suddenly understanding how I ended up being in codependent relationships. Because I'm constantly craving love from my mother, which she couldn't give me the love that I wanted the way I wanted it, that's a whole topic by itself. I wasn't getting the love that I felt that I needed. And so I kept reaching for that, and from her, and I kept getting no kind of thing. And anyway, we had a major event between us when I was about 15, and the relationship, I just said, I can't do this anymore. So big rupture, and as a self-protection kind of thing. And then, of course, I'm trying to get that love in other relationships. That was the thing that was so powerful. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm looking for that love in all my other relationships. And that's why they're not healthy. That's why they're not. And a lot of us, I mean, codependency is rampant. And by the way, I'm just saying, I'm not sure it's possible not to have a codependent relationship with your children as a mother. I just don't know how you don't do that, because the connection's so strong. We have to work as mothers. I feel, I have a son, and I work on this. I feel that as mothers, we have to work harder than other people on our codependency, because we're so connected to our kids. If that makes sense. Is that something you've experienced?
Like with my daughter?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I could see that. Yeah. I mean, we are very close. I would say we have a strong bond.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can definitely see how. And I think women in general are just so nurturing and giving and wanting to give to others before themselves. And sometimes there can be resentment or whatever it may be when you don't receive it back. So, yeah, I can definitely see how that can be more common with moms.
Yeah, if there's a rupture in the relationship, the daughter may have difficulty receiving love, feeling like they're worthy of receiving love. If there's this, I'm not saying your relationship, I'm saying the opposite kind of relationship where there's tension between the mother and the daughter.
Yeah.
Where there's a good relationship, because I had an amazing relationship with my stepmother, who was not my biological mother, so that bond is different, but she was very much a surrogate mother. I remember feeling safe with her, and I felt like she was a real grounding tether in my life.
Mm.
So her presence was very made me feel like I had her presence. So that's interesting. Her presence in my life made me feel more grounded.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not depending on myself for grounding. I'm actually looking at her. I'm just saying that's another example of a kind of codependent thing where we can do that for ourselves. And I'm not saying I did any of that consciously. I'm saying that I experienced that she was someone that's helping me find a foundation in my life,
Mm-hmm.
which I think mothers do. I mean, I think regardless of the relationship we have with our mothers, they contribute to the foundation, how we build our foundation. Loving that you have a great relationship and that it's very nurturing. Not all relationships with mothers are. And in our past, like in my family, we have records going back like 12 generations, which is pretty amazing, like remarkable, really extraordinary on one side of my family, my mother's side. And when we go back and look at those, there's just generation after generation before my mother's generation where the women had babies and they maybe lost half of them to miscarriage or in the first year to one disease or another. So a lot of grief in that. And that, imagine if you're carrying grief for a lost child and you get pregnant again and you're carrying the next child, but you haven't been able to fully grieve the first child, that imprint is going to go on to that baby because you're the baby swimming in that in the womb. Yeah. Also, another thing I'd like to say is that we're talking about the past in terms of how the imprints come in and the different kinds of imprints that could come in, but also consider this. Remember, we talked about the present moment and we can access the past, present, and future. And so in this moment, imagine a nested Russian doll where the little doll on the inside is the individual, like you as the individual. And then the next one, the next doll out is the family, the influence of the family. And then the next one is the influence of the culture that you and the family are living in. And then the next one would be like maybe the country you're living in. And then the next one would be the global community. And so now we're talking about influences of the present moment on all those different levels. And the next shell out, the next doll out would be the ancestral piece. So look at all those layers of influence we have acting on us in the present moment. Yeah, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's just interesting to me. I can't separate one thing from the other really, and I don't really try.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just aware of those tendencies. And because we were talking a little bit about grief, and there's a man named Francis Weller who does work on collective grief. And he's got a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow, which is amazing. I've just gotten it. I'm just starting to read it. And his discussion there, which it feeds right into our discussion here around mothers and mother wound and the things that we carry. He had this one phrase, because I listened to him in a lecture, which is why I went and got his book. He said he helps people with ritual around clearing collective grief. And he used the phrase, the collective grief of generations of unspent tears.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard that phrase and I still feel it. I still get goosebumps when I hear that. So that tells me that it's hitting me so deeply. That tells me that there's some truth to that I might not understand all of it. But when you look at my family records and you look at humanity, really, you can see the grief stacking up just around motherhood, just around the stuff that mothers carry, right? Yeah. And we wonder why some of us are having difficulty with fertility. When we carry that kind of energy, this is why we do ancestral clearing, because it helps us release the burden of all that. Yes.
Using our 4-step restorative fertility framework, we will 1. Reveal the physical and energetic root cause. 2. We will remove the barriers to you conceiving and carrying a pregnancy to term. 3. We will rebalance the physical and energetic body with bio-individual strategies. And 4, receive. You will nourish the mind, body, and spirit so you can receive baby. So this method is for the woman who is ready to transcend the limitations the Western space has put on her body and her fertility. I have 3 one-on-one spots, and this is for the woman who is ready to claim her fertility back. She's ready to step back into her power. She is ready to do what it takes to finally get pregnant. It's very limited. If you are feeling called and you want to learn more about this, so we can really connect, decide if this is an aligned step forward for both of us, find me on Instagram at @the_wellness_pharmacist. My Instagram is going to be in the show notes. Absolutely. And I feel like the fertility phase season is such a beautiful time to really begin this type of work if you haven't already, or even if you're curious about it and interested to learn more about it, right? Maybe read some of these books that you have mentioned, and then working with someone who can help you clear these things, because this mother wound that you've been speaking to, a lot of people might not be so familiar with that terminology, but you're so right. Like, it can be just passed on generation to generation. I think a big one that comes to my mind for me is when moms maybe talk down on their own selves and their own body about like how they look, their appearance, things like that. And then maybe they are nitpicking their daughters as they're growing up as well. So I feel like that's just like a glaring mother wound that you could.
Yeah. So look, the first thing that comes, because I noticed that in my own mother, and I was pain. I mean, I was like, I'm not enough, was what I ended up, the meaning I made of all that. I'm not enough, but because it happened so much. But think about that. My mother had her own insecurities. And I feel she was terrified that I would have them too. And so she did everything that she could to make sure that I was perfect,
Mm,
right? To drive me towards perfection so that I wouldn't screw up and maybe make the same mistakes she did. But you see, it's got this shadow to it that's it's all in the delivery. Yes, we can teach our daughters to not repeat the cycle, but it's how we teach that's important. Yeah.
mhm.
And I can give you an experience of ancestral clearing. There's about 30 different ways we can get at the burden. When I do these private sessions and group sessions, and John Newton's available at his website, Health Beyond Belief. He does the work. But there is one way that I can bring it in a podcast form. And I'd love to share that with your audience if we have time.
Sure.
Okay. As I said, we use the word forgive to mean offer up that which no longer serves us, and we're offering up to the creator of whatever created all of this consciousness that we're in, the whole field. And I'm going to address that in this prayer as divine creator. And I'll do it for all of us since I'm a woman too. And I'd like everyone listening to this to just notice, breathe normally and notice whatever sensation you're feeling in your body. As an example, I feel my sitting bones on the chair and my feet on the floor, and I can feel a little bit of buzzing in my right shoulder, and yeah, a little bit in my upper arm. But so that's just an example of sensation I'm feeling. Whatever you're feeling for you, just note it. Notice the number of intensity of that, whatever sensation you're feeling, all overall from 0 to 10, and just check the number for now. And then when we're done, we'll check the number again. And I'd just like you to breathe normally and let these words just pass over you. Divine Creator, all that you are, thank you for the gift of life and connection. We ask humbly that you please help us and all of our relationships and all of our ancestors and all of their relationships throughout all space, time, dimension, realms, lifetimes, and incarnations. For any time there was a rupture in relationship between mother and child in the womb, through the birth experience, as a newborn, or at any other time, and for all that led up to it and arose from it, including unhealthy beliefs or limitations, for poor boundaries and unrealized sense of self and poor self-esteem. Please help us all, everyone involved, to forgive one another and forgive ourselves, please, and thank you. For any time mothers felt fearful or powerless in the face of the experience of conception, gestation, or birth, and any adverse effects this had on both the mother and the child. For all injustice, anger, regret, and letdown around any unhealthy womb or birth experience, including sexual miscarriage or abortion, and for any guilt or shame that followed. For any time anyone felt a sense of shame or that there was something wrong with them, but they didn't know why, please help us all to forgive and release everyone involved, and help us forgive and release ourselves, please, and thank you. For any codependence that developed between mothers and children through the entire lineage and all that arose from it, including but not limited to caretaking others to the point of resentment and exhaustion, for neediness or feeling we had to have the approval of others in order to act rather than stand on our own power and act from there. Please help everyone involved, directly and indirectly, to forgive and release one another, forgive and release yourselves. Please and thank you. For any time women felt the weight of the obligation to bear children but didn't experience the joy of it, and for all that the children felt because of it. For any time anyone felt the pressure of having to live unrealized dreams of their mother rather than their own. And for any time anyone felt they had to play small in life rather than rise up to their full potential. Please help everyone forgive and release one another, forgive and release yourselves. Please and thank you. Divine Creator, please help all the mothers forgive all the children. Please help all the children forgive all the mothers. Help all the fathers forgive all the children, and all the children forgive all the fathers. Help all the women forgive all the men, and all the men forgive all the women. Please help them all forgive each other throughout the entire lineage, for all that happened and didn't happen, for all anyone made it mean, and for all the letdown because of it, for all of it, for once and for all, now and forever. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. Please and thank you. Now just take a nice big breath in and let it out, and notice how that feels in the body. And what your number is now compared to when you started.
That was very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very nice for anyone who is listening. And yeah, actually, I got a notification today that Spotify now allows comments on podcast episodes. So if you tracked your number before and after, definitely share it in the comments. I'd love to know. And yeah, my body feels very relaxed. Don't remember what my number was before, but it's good. It's very relaxed, and just, I feel like my foot was feeling uncomfortable before we got started, and it's not now.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. The foot, and really more the toes, but the foot generally in our practice can represent the relationship between parents and children.
Okay.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's an interesting model. We have a little bit of a kind of a skeleton of what things may or may not mean, what they represent. But we also, the practice really is, because it's in the present moment, we drop into the present moment and we build the field of what's in the present moment when we do the work. So we start and at it's the foot. It's maybe a relationship between a parent and a child. And then we've got processes that would help us flesh that out.
Mm-hmm.
and find the root of where it started in the lineage. That's cool.
Yeah, so a question for you, because I am familiar with similar energetic modalities to clear generational trauma and all those things. So through this, is it also clearing it for your ancestors simultaneously? And then, of course, any future generations.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we clear it all because of that quantum looking at it, and it's
Right.
and I've actually and I'm what, this doesn't normally happen to me. I'm not one of these people, because I just I'm grounded in the science world, quite limited, right? But I have a foot in the other world too. I've had a couple of experiences where I was doing ancestral release work, and I actually it's felt like my ancestors were behind me, egging me on, asking me to continue, being very grateful for the work. So that was interesting. It just was there. I wasn't looking for it. It was just whoop, there it is.
Hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And you just have to trust that it came up.
Yeah, and I really was raised to not believe in my intuition for the most part.
Mm.
That I had to be all logic, and I had a lot of intuitive stuff as a kid, and I had to wrestle with that. And then as I got older, I started dealing with the beliefs I had around that and releasing those and trusting my intuition, and that there's a lot of that. So when stuff like that happens to me, I'm like, got it. It's like,
Hmm.
thank you. It's kind of like
Exactly.
that, and it's real to me. I don't doubt it at all. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, yes, looking into one of those books, maybe just being curious if and how this mother wound is present for you, and just understanding that it is crucial and important and can have positive effects on future generations that you have. So while you're in the thick of your fertility journey, I like to think and say that certain things may be coming up and mirroring to you where you are being called to heal and to acknowledge and all of that. So I love the work that you're sharing with us and the work that you do, Elizabeth. And I do want to touch on two more things. So you're a best-selling author of The Way Through Chronic Pain: Tools to Reclaim Your Healing Power. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit about your book with the audience.
Yes, thank you. I suffered with chronic pain for 40 years, and I finally found a doctor who understood the nature of chronic pain. So my book is really for doctors, nurses, caretakers, family members, friends of anyone who's suffering from chronic pain, or sufferers, or people that actually suffer from chronic pain. It's got the tools that help me heal, and also lays out really the landscape of what's happening in the mind of a chronic pain sufferer. And chronic pain is any pain that's felt 15 days out of 30 for 3 months or more. Any pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, it all sends the same signal to the brain. So it's a much bigger area than most people think it's just physical. It's not. It's this whole other area. That grief experience I talked about, that unresolved grief in the lineage, that's a chronic pain thing. Yeah.
Mm.
So anyway, so that book covers that area. It's a fairly small book, but it packs a punch. Yeah.
Amazing. Is it available on Amazon?
It's available on Amazon or through my website, and you can get it on Amazon in Audible or Kindle or paperback.
Amazing. Did you do the Audible yourself?
No, I gave it to my friend Terry Welbook, who's that's what she does, and she's a wellness person, and she did that for me. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats. That's awesome. And you also have a freebie, an Ancestral Clearing Prayers ebook, if you could tell us about that as well.
Yeah, that's 8 different prayers, ancestral clearing prayers, like we did. It doesn't have the mother one prayer in there, but it's got prayers around issues around abundance, a peace, a global peace, peace within, finding your true self. It's 8 different prayers around general things that we all could use. And go ahead and grab that and work the prayers and see how it works for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just being open to it. Can you tell everyone where they can learn more about you, connect with you, and if you have any final words that you want to leave with the listeners?
Sure. You can find me at my website, which is Elizabeth with a hyphen Kipp.com, KIP, Elizabeth elizabeth-kipp.com. You got to put the dash in there, you won't find me. And I would like to just say that it's just my favorite thing, is that the greatest healer lives within you. It's not, I mean, like all the doctors, all the healthcare professionals, they're wonderful guides. The doctors can stitch up a wound and set a bone, but they can't tell the body how to heal it. Only the body knows how to do that. So just remember that piece. Yeah. And thank you so much, Katie, for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
Yes, and I love your words of wisdom. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for being on and just sharing your personal experience and your expertise and your passion.
Thanks so much, Katie. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.